So welcome to another WORBLI Talks, guys. It's been a little while since we had the last one, and I think it was about 3 weeks, and we're here. We're going to start fresh. There's been a lot happening, but I'm just going to pass it off to Dominic, and I'm looking forward to it, man.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I had a little break there. Actually took some time off to get a little vacation time, but yeah, everything's continued to move. We are, primarily focused right now on launches. That's the top priority for us. And part of that internally is the compliance infrastructure that we're kind of rolling out sort of additional phases for those of us working at the foundation. Refining what the various account models are going to look like at the next level for trying to streamline, things like corporate accounts, accredited investors, all of those different account designations that we've talked about. And so those are the big things that are happening for the time being. It's just continuing to build. So the compliance stuff is really just the continued infrastructure. So, everyone's well aware that WORBLI starts with the verified user accounts, the AML KYC, and all of that. But of course, we want to be able to expand that over time. And so Tokenoro, which everybody's really familiar with, is the first project that we have that's going to require the accredited investor designation. So that's starting with using a third-party service, much like we use on FIDO for our general AML KYC, and our services that will do the accredited investor check, which is more extensive. There's two types. There's kind of a self-reporting accredited investor check where you basically kind of opt in and say, yes, in fact, I meet the criteria. But for something like Tokenoro, it requires verification. But what's cool about this is that it's giving us a first shot at figuring out how we might be able to kind of integrate this in the future, whether or not we can just develop our own process of verification, testing a third-party service to see if that might be the way to go. But as we're rolling along here, the cool part about getting apps live is they start to inform basically the roadmap, right? And what kind of features do we need to build? One of the things that I know I've talked about with Rob quite a bit is that so many blockchain projects seem to just be creating technology, which is really cool. The blockchain technology kind of infrastructure is definitely something that's going to need to be, continue to be developed over the years. And we've gone from things like Ethereum to, Lisk and Stratus, and now we've got EOS, these programmable blockchains that are adding more and more features that applications can leverage. But at WORBLI, it's important that we're not just building for what we think people might want, but we're building for what they actually need right now, because our mandate requires us to be useful, right? We don't want to be out there spending tons of time and energy building all these cool features that sound really great, but are actually not something that anybody needs at this stage. And so having clients is a big part of that journey. And that's something that's exciting for us at this point, because we're getting out of theoretical and we're getting into actual use cases. And so Tokenoro has been informing our process around accredited investors and what that might look like in the future. There's some other applications that we've had discussions with where there are other designations like broker-dealer, for example, that we'll probably want to be or want to find a way to screen for and create sort of designated accounts. So that's been really great. So the compliance stuff is not only around coming up with different designations for our WORBLI user accounts, but it's also about customer service. And so, we're getting really detailed about creating different designations, different levels within our customer service. So we have a level 1 designation, which will be for customer service folks who are just, shepherding people through the onboarding process, basically tech support, but not necessarily getting any private information from people. And that group of people has a certain level of certification for us. And once we get these things in place, we're going to put something together to kind of go public with our sort of internal documentation. But the journey is that as you move up the customer service designation and the more personal information or sensitive information you have access to, the more enhanced our back-end due diligence is around things like background checks and reference checks, certifications, if they're required for the various levels. So kind of boring stuff on its face, but exciting in a sense that these are the things that enable us on WORBLI to start hosting applications that normally would either have to be entirely private, apps just that would have to run their own chains so they could control all this type of level of compliance, and becoming this trusted third party that applications don't, can feel confident and safe launching their apps and, being able to feel like they can rely on some of the WORBLI customer support staff. And we know that as applications come online in the future, it's going to be a challenge for them to have the kind of customer support that we think is going to be required in the early kind of user journey for blockchain projects, which is that the technology is maturing, and of course it'll get easier and easier to use. But for now, there's a technical leap that every application will go through in one form or another. And so we're kind of preparing ourselves so that this is, again, another way that we can add value to apps. When you come to WORBLI, you know that the AML KYC is taken care of for you. That's great. That's a big selling point. But then we want to keep adding sort of additional services and features. And one of those is, yes, we have a process for verification and due diligence around customer service teams that apps can potentially hire and utilize for their own projects, because it's a hard thing to plan for, especially as a new business, the startup, right? You hope that at your launch there's going to be 10,000 people eager to sign up, but you don't know for sure if that'll be the case. And so we're trying to, in that way, predict a little bit what we know will be challenges for these companies. And so our goal here is to eventually open this up so that anybody can go through the process. And that could be an additional kind of badge almost on your WORBLI account, is that you're a verified level 1 customer service agent, or maybe level 2, or there'll even be like supervisory positions, because what we're hoping to build once we get this process in place is a pool. And it's something that Matt's well aware of. It's a little thing we've been working on with Tribe for a while now to potentially create a freelance type environment for WORBLI certified and verified customer service reps. So that's a neat little thing that we haven't talked about, but I thought in this meeting we could at least maybe reveal that to some of the folks that are listening. And so, but as part of the compliance infrastructure, these are the things that we're thinking about. It'll also be a process for kind of human resources internally to WORBLI, making sure that as we bring on new team members, that everybody's going through these processes. And then it's about the manual processing of applicants. And so this has been one of the challenges and one of the reasons why maybe some of you who are listening have gotten kind of stuck in limbo, we really needed a final ruling around what set of criteria we're going to use when a user gets flagged. There's lots of reasons why a user gets flagged. Many of them are no big deal. It could just be that, I don't know, maybe at one point you worked on a political campaign in your country, and so you might come up as politically exposed. Well, it's probably unlikely that that actually means anything, but we have to have documentation of all of this. And so in order to be somewhat efficient in the future and not have people caught in this situation for, days or weeks or months, we need a very clear process and clear guidelines around what we're going to, just sort of document and pass people with, and what particular requirements or flags are going to be reasonable grounds for not creating a WORBLI account. And so that's another big part of what we're implementing right now. And our tech team's built a set of customer service tools for us that will allow specific internal WORBLI team members to have access to some of the user data when you do get flagged, and then be able to process you through our criteria and hopefully create your account, and you'll be on your way. And that sounds like a pretty simple process, but when you're looking to achieve the highest possible level of compliance for a potentially global audience, it has to be right. And there's not some easy guideline that we could just go look at, so our attorney, Tom Bicknell, has been working really hard on this for us. In addition, once we go live with applications and there's more and more financial transactions on the network, we need an anti-money laundering policy. And, that gets complicated. There's general guidelines. And it's mostly up to us to sort of decide how we want to go about doing this. But what's been important for us as WORBLI is trying to protect people's privacy and people's rights. As much as the WORBLI network is not about being anonymous, we don't want you to be public, right? We don't want your privacy compromised. We don't want people to feel like they're exposed. That they're at risk, because we know that that's an ongoing challenge, and it's something that I think 99% of people in blockchain would like to see a solution to, which is this feeling of exposure that we have on the internet now as it exists, or the dozens of private databases where all of our information is on at any given time, from the banks that we've signed up for to healthcare apps that we might be a part of, or government, websites and databases. And so credit scores was a very high profile one here recently in the US. And we don't want to contribute to that. Our goal is not to become another massive centralized database that's potentially at risk for being hacked. So as we go about meeting these compliance guidelines, there's this little trick all along the way, which is, how do we do it? Because there's a very simple way to do so much of this, which is control everything, watch everything, right? Monitor everything, and collect data, collect tons and tons and tons of data, which has been really the model of the bulk of your sort of internet heavyweights at this point, right? Google doesn't hardly charge you for much of anything, but they sure as hell make a lot of money with your data. Facebook doesn't really charge you for anything. They make a lot of money with your data. Even Netflix, Amazon, right? Amazon's an extremely successful retailer, but they also make a lot of money with your data. And so we've made a commitment that that wasn't going to be one of the ways in which we were monetizing this project. We want transparency, and we want honesty in financial services, but we don't want people to feel like we're harvesting their information. We'd eventually have every plan for that to be possible if the user wants to opt in for their own reasons. I personally believe that in the future, one of the more valuable commodities that we'll have as individuals the potential to monetize is our data. If anybody's following the development of artificial intelligence and machine learning, data is like the raw material, right? It's the gold that these algorithms and applications require in order to be truly effective at what they do. I'm sure everybody who's got an iPhone or an Android smartphone knows that your voice to talk, for example, needs to be trained. And the more you allow your microphone to be on and all of that, it's great. But we're all running up against this sort of conundrum here, which is how much convenience do we want, but how much privacy do we want? And they can be mutually exclusive at times. You need to give up a lot of privacy for convenience. And at the heart of the sort of Bitcoin experiment, so to speak, at the beginning, was that people would want control, and they'd be willing to give up a fair amount of convenience to do it. The early Bitcoin days, it was all about you could control your own money, absolutely, and you still can. However, it's time consuming, and it requires a degree of technical education to pull off and to protect, and you are 100% responsible, because that's the other side that comes with freedom, is responsibility. So one of the things that we think about a lot in everything we do is, how do we find that balance? How do we find the balance between user experience, convenience, and privacy and freedom, right, for the individual user? And my hope is that over time we have layers, right? There'll be users who probably don't care, would rather have as much convenience as possible, and that'll be their choice. And I hope to see a kind of a pathway for that user where they can kind of just opt in everything and say, hey, make it as easy on me as possible. I don't care. Just, do whatever it takes to get me there. And then there'll be, a more kind of manual version for users who want more control, but are willing to take on the responsibility that goes with that. And so, the point of doing all of this isn't to create another, big brother machine. That's never been the mandate for WORBLI. It's always been about access and freedom and giving users, empowering people, rather than trying to find new and interesting ways to control them. So the compliance framework is extremely important to what we're doing, so that I think everybody can feel confident and comfortable, whether it's applications going live or users, that if there are problems, we can engage in a dispute resolution process. And we need to know who we're dealing with to do all of those things, but at the same time, we want to minimize the amount of potential risk there is for users' privacy and data in the process. So it's definitely an ongoing challenge, but it's something that we take extremely seriously. So I don't think any of the compliance infrastructure stuff we're doing is going to be real visible on the outside, but internally it'll be a tremendous asset for us, because if it gets to the point where, as we hope, that we become high profile enough and successful enough, we know it's not a matter of if, it's when, regulators will come calling and want to take a look at how we're doing things. We want to be, above and beyond prepared for those experiences. And really, we'd like to invite them in as soon as possible to start getting involved and getting engaged. Our philosophy is that, these regulatory bodies can often get judged by the actions they take that people don't like, or this sort of general sentiment that government is, kind of an enemy of the people. And I've taken the position myself that government's a reflection of the people. And if we choose to engage and get them involved, they're a heck of a lot more likely to be useful and a positive experience, as opposed to creating this kind of black box environment and trying to just sort of dodge them at every turn. That usually is only going to lead to a sort of an ongoing conflict that I don't think the individual users or WORBLI as a whole will win. So better to get them involved in the process, help them understand what we're trying to do, and hopefully create a far more favorable environment for everyone in the process. So the compliance infrastructure is a project that I expect us to be all but wrapped up by the end of this month internally. And then that should time out hopefully well with some application launches. I'm sure everybody would love for me to produce some dates at this point. It's not something I can really do. I will say I don't have any. I know that Utility X is in the late stages of their development. And one of the things that, because this has been something that, we've been talking about it for a long time. But part of the reason why Utility X hasn't gone live as of yet is because we keep expanding its scope, which is great. It's going to be a pretty cool product when it goes live. But it was initially meant to just be a sort of derivatives exchange where we were going to be able to separate out token utility from speculative value, and create these sort of newer financial instruments to help optimize network resources, right? The concept being you do want people that are holding the token, whether it's apps that are, holding onto the token because they need the network resources, or people who are potentially just waiting to use them later. But if we've got a lot of people doing that, then our token really is a utility. It's something you can redeem to access the network. And if you don't need network access right now, we don't want those resources to be locked up. So that was the original vision for Utility X, but then that's extended to the network, the WORBLI resource model. And so now Utility X is housing the resource model, which was a natural fit because we've already got all of this code built for the utility token derivatives and the other, functions surrounding that. But again, as you add something, it's going to extend it. So I think we're getting near the end of that journey, but I don't have any hard dates for that. Tokenuro is the app that I do have information in that right now. I know that it's slated for the first week of May. However, again, there's been delays. Originally, we were talking about, I think, April 15th or so. And it hasn't been delayed too much. Progress has been really good. But, what we're finding as we're starting to work with these various teams is that it's just hard the first time you do something. It's pretty much what it comes down to. There's just unforeseen circumstances, different challenges. Tokenuro is not just creating an app to buy a token, right? There's tons of those. That's been done. That's not the magic. But now we're adding an accredited investor check, right? Now we're adding the fact that there's going to be, some form of WORBLI account creation or verification in the process. Now we're adding things like, I just spaced on the other one. There's a security token aspect of it, but again, it's not just a simple web app. It's multifaceted, and the payment gateway. There's a great cryptocurrency, and eventually will be fiat payment gateway that's been developed by Transledger. It's one of their products, and it's a great product. And Tokenuro could have gone with maybe something a little bit more developed and established, but it wouldn't have had near the functionality that they wanted. But again, here's a new product that they're adding into the mix, and so it's going to take a little back and forth to get everything to work properly, and above all else to be secure. The other issue that we're dealing with is at least to this stage, there isn't a single app that we currently have slated to go live that isn't going to be dealing with financial transacting, sensitive, information, personal information. So the security level on these things has to be basically the highest you can possibly get. None of these applications want to take the risk of being hacked. And so, it definitely takes a little bit longer to make sure that you have all these things right. So it's a little bit frustrating. Everybody would love to see things happening faster. But I do feel confident in the fact that none of the applications we're building are trivial. They're high quality. They're being built by high quality teams, and they're going to be pretty innovative in and of their own right. A project like Utility X, for example, could easily have a team as big as or bigger than WORBLI in and of itself. And so, we are trying to pull off a lot of those over time. And in these early stages, it's something that we need to be engaged in. Of course, every app we build, every integration we do, we're going to learn more and more. We're going to continue to automate. We're going to build tools. The infrastructure will get a lot more mature. And I'm sure that time to market will get cut down substantially. But for these first, half dozen or so applications, there's a pretty steep learning curve. But, I do expect to see some things start happening. I do expect to see some testing. We did talk with Didier Martin over at Transledger about their entire project. I know that they've been kind of out and about on Telegram and talked about some of the things they're doing. But the last update I got from them was that this week they're starting to test the interblockchain technology, specifically the functionality of swapping EOS for WORBLI and WORBLI for EOS, which should be a feature that we'll be able to make available here in the next month or two, which I think is going to be really good. And that will extend to just about every EOS sister chain that I'm aware of. Certainly like Telos and Boss and some of the other more popular ones. But, it's going to be one of, I feel like, our first major contributions to the ecosystem is bringing this technology in to allow that kind of functionality, which will hopefully allow users to be able to easily move their tokens around the various EOS sister chains and into and out of their WORBLI account. Then I know that they've built their DEX, and what we're hoping to do is to get them to start doing some simulated testing of the DEX. So just working with, simulated tokens, right? Nothing of any real value, but I'm pushing to try to get them to release and get some testing going by the end of the month. And I know that all of this infrastructure is what eventually leads to the FX platform, which is kind of their, end game with the project. And that's, something that's pretty massive. It's a huge market. I think that what they're bringing is going to be incredibly innovative. But there's a lot of licensing around that. That's something that, boy, do they have a lot of fun ahead of themselves there. But they're well on their way to getting licensed in Canada, the United States, Europe. And those are some of the bigger jurisdictions. And then hopefully they'll continue to roll out from there. But so it's progress. But they've got a huge project. And I know that security is at the top of their mind as well. They can't afford any mistakes on an FX platform. We're going to be talking about millions of dollars moving around in transactions. This isn't going to be a joke. This is going to be nothing like crypto liquidity. I mean, I think I was reading something today, global FX is by far the biggest trading market. It's bigger than all the other equities markets combined in the amount of volume and money that moves around. So it's trillions of dollars. Not that they'll be moving that at the beginning, but it's not a market where people trade $100 for 60 euros or whatever. But it will eventually enable some super cool consumer applications and fiat gateways and a lot of the other stuff that we've been talking about. So Great project. So we've got Utility X, Token RL, the Transledger project with the DEX and the FX platform. We're still in development on the real estate tokenization platform. Just, getting the kind of final, structure and design around what we want to build there. I know that there's, funding for the build and there's clients for the build. But again, we're going to be talking about transactions in the, at minimum, tens of thousands of dollars, upwards to tens of millions of dollars when we're talking about commercial real estate. So it's not something that you can take lightly and build overnight. But excited about that and expect to start to see more progress on that in the next month or so. And then the decentralized insurance project, that, for those of you who don't know, is also something that the group behind Utility X is bringing to the platform. And so, they've really put their emphasis on Utility X. And then I know that they've been working on the design and the planning and all of that stuff around the decentralized insurance, but it's going to take, a little bit of time because that's the next thing that once Utility X goes live that they'll be focusing on developing. So don't have any real timelines for that one either, but I do know that there's already some insurance, not agents, I guess, really, but the groups, insurance companies lined up to be a part of that want to partner with the platform. So it's going to be really exciting to see that kind of change into a market that I'll say I knew hardly anything about before getting engaged with this project, but it's a pretty cool thing. And then we're still talking to Signal X is a group that I think's been mentioned in the chat. Just ongoing discussions, trying to figure out and help shape what they're trying to do. It's definitely again, another project that requires the right levels of compliance and, the right plan to, I think, really implement it in a way that's going to make a lot of sense. There's a couple of other groups that we haven't gone public with, a video game company that's pretty interesting that we've had some preliminary discussions with. I think folks have probably seen a little bit of action around token shares. I know that they're pretty active in the EOS community. We've been talking to Jad and those guys over there about potentially bringing that platform to WORBLI. It looks like a promising piece of technology. And then the other thing that we've been working on a lot with is Tribe. And so we've been having a lot of discussions with Tribe about how we can just kind of deepen the partnership between us. Tribe, as everyone's aware, has done a lot of our, community management and customer service work. And we're big fans of the Tribe media platform. We think that they've got a really great product going and it's only going to improve and get better. And we've talked about a lot of different add-ons that we might be able to bring in terms of things like crowdfunding or charitable giving, payment gateways. We think that there's a lot of synergies and integrations that are possible between the two teams. And so we're having some pretty deep discussions about how to improve that partnership. So I hope to have more information and potentially an announcement in the next, couple weeks to a month or so. And then I guess the other piece of news, we'll be doing a release about this, but, EOS Titan has officially come on as a core strategic partner. They're going to be leading the charge to optimize the network performance. We're expecting to see some of the highest transaction speeds, if not the highest transaction speeds for an EOS chain in the next couple of months. But also just optimizing for performance. It's not just transaction speeds. I know that's an easy metric, It's kind of sexy to talk about, 4,000 TPS, 10,000 TPS, but, transactions in a blockchain are not just simple transfers all the time. And so we need to optimize for movement, right? Different types of transactions. It's not just transferring WORBLI token or Bitcoin or whatever. But we do expect to have some really great performance results and data and information to be able to share with everybody as we go through the process. Titan's going to be deploying a lot of the tools, like EOS mechanics stuff that that's been pretty popular amongst the block producers on mainnet, and then building other tools as needed to measure the type of metrics that we know that financial applications are going to be really interested in. So all in all, everything's still moving. We're still pushing really hard to get something live this month. Right now, that's something that I'm personally putting a lot of energy into. We're talking with some other applications that are already deployed on EOS mainnet, some on Ethereum that might be able to port over. But we're getting pretty active. So, the two major things are business development and compliance. That's what we're all about. And then the other thing I do have an update for is the WORBLI portal. We've talked about that we have a new UX. We learned a lot during last year's launch and the fourth quarter of 2018. I'm pretty excited about what I've seen so far. It's definitely just a better user experience. It's more smooth. It should be more efficient. It should also be lead to better conversion for people going through the AML KYC. It's a lot more directed as to making sure people get accurate information in the right places. We've worked with our AML KYC provider quite a bit to optimize for their system. And so the update I have for that is that we're doing integration with our website, just testing the error conditions, fixing any bugs we can find. We're still working on some integration with users' webcams for some of the KYC verification stuff to make that a little bit easier. And then we're hoping sometime next week to open it up internally to the team and our block producers and some other internal partners for testing. We are definitely going to take our time with this one and try to be as sure as possible that it's a smooth process before we completely open it up to the wild. So yeah, that's my update.
Awesome. Dominic, did you want to either pass it off to marketing or Rob?
So I think we were just planning on, I kind of gave the overall update from the internal team, but I know that we wanted to give Mark an opportunity to talk a little bit about the adventures in Dubai and all of that stuff.
Okay. Matt, would you like me to take it from here?
Yeah, please do. I'm actually really excited to find out how that went.
All right. Thanks, Dominic. Thanks, Matt. I was fortunate enough to be selected as a delegate on an Austrade mission to the Blockchain Summit in Dubai last week. Austrade is the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. It's a government department that helps Australian businesses export product and services around the world, and they have 83 offices across the globe. Interestingly, Australia's embassy is in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates, and they have 50 people or 50 plus people on the ground there. And in Dubai, we have a consulate, and they have 100 plus people on the ground in Dubai. So that gives you some idea how important Dubai is to Australia. I think the ambassador, who was kind enough to share some remarks with us, commented that Australia's presence in the United Arab Emirates is the largest overseas presence that we have anywhere in the world. So it's a very important trading partner with Australia, and it was great to be on the first block Austrade sponsored. I'll keep my comments just to the first couple of days. It was a 4-day visit. The first 2 days were Austrade organised with introductions and meetings, presentations, discussions, roundtables, etc., with a variety of entities from Dubai. And the last 2 days were the actual blockchain summit. We met a raft of people. I mean, Dubai is called the city of the future, or one of the cities of the future. They have a stated policy that they want to move all government services onto blockchain-related platforms by 2020, which is a very aggressive time frame. But they tend to do that. And one of the benefits that a country like Dubai has is that it has one guy calling the shots, unlike our Western democracies, where we have governments and political parties and argy-bargy going through Congress or Parliament. Over in Dubai, the Sheikh says, from tomorrow, we will do this, and it's law from the next day. So they have the wonderful benefit of someone who's emancipated and enlightened, very modern and very forward-thinking, just deciding that he's going to do certain things. So we visited with the Dubai Future Fund, the Dubai Future Accelerators, the Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund, a whole bunch of accelerators and hubs. We were shown over Area 2071, which is part of one of the accelerators where they're bringing all sorts of different businesses into Dubai. There's all sorts of opportunities for companies to engage with Dubai. The best chance of getting anything done with them is if you've got some kind of product, service or platform that will benefit Dubai in some way, shape or form. You don't actually have to move your business to Dubai. They'll fund you in other parts of the world, but they're really only interested in working with people that are developing products or services or platforms that have an application within Dubai. They're heavily focused on turning all of their government services into blockchain-related activities, as I said, by 2020. So it was absolutely fantastic. These people, there's no stopping them. The place is riddled with fast cars and flashy buildings and lights and bling, and it's amazing. And they started out less than 50 years ago as a pearling port, a place literally a blot on the map, and now they're probably one of the busiest cities in the world. So it was a very interesting and enlightening time. Sam wants me to produce a few blogs, so I'll limit my comments to that, and we'll produce some information and publish it via the social media channels in the coming weeks. Thanks.
Mark, just a quick follow-up question. When you're telling people about WORBLI and talking about WORBLI over there, what's kind of the reaction? What are people saying when you're speaking about the platform and what it's capable of doing?
They're very interested in KYC AML. It's key. It's a key component of what they want to do in terms of delivering government services. So it was good to have some conversations with them. They are interesting people, and they, like all of us, they realise that blockchain is not a panacea and a solution for every problem in the world. It is only applicable in certain instances. So we had some interesting discussions about how a blockchain-based platform can be deployed for a government department. They're very interested in what we've done, and I'm looking forward to exploring those opportunities further with some of the senior people. But, in an environment where there's 20-odd delegates from Australia and a variety of different businesses, I couldn't monopolise the conversation. I will say this, though. They have a thing called the UAE Pass, which is a digital identity. And despite everyone's protestations, they've worked out in the end it was easier to produce the UAE Pass using certificate authorities than it was to build it on a blockchain platform. So they're smart enough to know that blockchain's not the answer for everything. Certain things can be done with conventional databases or other methodologies. Yeah, it was good. It's good fun.
Yeah, it's interesting with a lot of the talk coming out of EOS speaking about doing the elections and, whether or not they're true or not, but doing the elections on blockchain and just a lot of other functions for blockchain in the future. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, voting is definitely an ideal solution for blockchain. I mean, the standard features of a database are CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. Well, in a blockchain world, it's just create and read. You forget about update and delete. So if you've got a solution that requires update and delete, blockchain's not for you.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Dominic, I'm going to send it back to you. Was there anybody else who wanted to have a few words before we maybe move over and start taking some questions? No? Microphone's off, my friend.
You're on mute, Dom.
I had to double mute. No, nothing particular on our end. be happy to just answer some questions. I did answer some in chat while Mark was talking. But
I saw that. So if anybody has any questions or wants to find out kind of anything about what's happening, it sounds like the next month is going to be spent tying up some of those technical policies. Of course, applications are launching, of which you're not going to be announcing dates at this point. But does anybody else inside of the chat? We had a couple of questions. They've both kind of been answered.
I understand that some people might just end up listening on, YouTube or whatever, but there was a question around Dan Larimer's response in Telegram around Block 1 and the 100 million tokens we put aside for them. And the comment's no comment. We're under NDA. We obviously have had conversations with people at Block 1. But as far as what they're going to do or not do with the tokens is not something that we can talk about. It'll reveal itself in time.
Fair enough. More questions. So that one's for you, Chris. But if anybody else has any more questions, feel free to ask them. And if not, then we'll
there was also a question about AML.
Yep.
And through our research, the answer we have, the question was, there's different AML policies globally, right? Some countries, have certain rules and others are more or less, restricted. There are global standards for sure, for the most part, but it starts with the foundations being in Singapore, right? So that was chosen strategically because Singapore is well respected globally as a center of finance, and it's a place that's strict and has standards that are on par with what are considered to be the general global guidelines that are accepted by most of the major countries in the world. But at the same time, they're known for innovation, right? So it's not compliance for the sake of compliance kind of thing. They are constantly looking to be progressive, to address digital currencies and provide clarity and allow for innovation. So we went through an entire process last year determining what was the best place to kind of call home as far as the foundation goes. And so, we need to follow those guidelines. But for AML, it's really just about reporting. We're not going to be the police of the blockchain. It's a type of scenario where if we see certain patterns, we just have to send out an alert for further investigation. And so what will ultimately happen is that as, more and more transactions are coming in and there's more and more users from all around the world, we'll likely start to see, a more granular approach where because you're AML KYC'd on WORBLI, right, we can flag your country of origin or your country of citizenship, whichever you've verified with. And if there are special rules for people in your country, we can apply those. And that there's a lot of different ways to do that, but we're experimenting with a lot of different technologies that I didn't quite want to talk about yet because a lot of these will be proprietary to us. But there is an open source framework that we've been working with around putting some of the rules actually in the token, which is a super cool way to do it because then it's not so much like you have to watch individuals. The token itself kind of watches itself, right? Like putting in something in a token that it's only to be traded between accredited investors, for example. If you don't have the accredited investor designation on your WORBLI account, the token won't transfer to your account. So we really don't have to worry about it. And again, with WORBLI, I think when people think about compliance, they kind of think about I'll say like the open world. like there's going to be lots of people coming in doing transactions that we don't know about. And that's not true. So one of the major things for AML is identifying that, in fact, the user is not already on a watch list, right? That doesn't mean that, anybody who might want to engage in some type of money laundering or illegal financial transfers is always going to show up on a watch list, but that cuts us down pretty substantially and reduces the overall risk to the network. So there's a lot of filters before we even kind of get into the territory where that starts to become possible. I think it's a little bit easier to deal with than it sounds like on its face. At first, I think people have this vision of like the current makeup of cryptocurrency traders and the fact that, people are anonymous, and how the heck would you ever be able to watch all that stuff or figure any of it out? And on WORBLI, that's not the case. It's a lot easier.
I did have a question come up recently. It's a little bit about the development community. There's a lot of people out there who have ideas for applications or have developed applications, kind of like we spoke to Jad. What's the process for getting listed on WORBLI? Is there any help for people who have applications that might be promising? And is there kind of a place or a contact where people can kind of get in touch and figure out if what they're doing might be good for the network?
Oh, you mean the process to launch an app? Yeah. So it's something that we're working on putting together a kind of just a public guideline so that it's just out there and something that we can post on our website, and I'm sure we'll make a Medium article out of. But the reality is the only true core component is, do you meet financial compliance standards? For example, you're trying to build a fiat gateway, say, for the United States. We're going to want to check, do you have money service businesses licenses? If you don't have them in all 50 states, which states do you have them in? Are you planning on, do you have a good process for potentially screening users to make sure that you're not going to be allowing users to use your platform that you don't have the proper licensure for, right? So a compliance review is really the core indicator. If you want to buy WORBLI tokens and launch your application, as long as you meet the compliance standards, we don't have a problem with that. Nobody's going to stop you from going live on WORBLI. Now, have we taken a very hands-on approach to any applications that have come our way so far to really try to work with them? Of course. These are, again, very sensitive projects that have high risk if something does go wrong. And we're a little cautious of kind of curating this first group of apps because just strategically, we think it would be a bit of a disaster if we let something go live that had any problems in the early days. It's around compliance, but then it's also security. We'll be doing a security audit, wanting to know what precautions are you taking, what are you going to be looking at to prevent, how, if you're taking on any sensitive individual data, how are you protecting it? It's really just security and compliance. If you look like you're making a solid effort in that arena, there's going to be no problem building and launching an app on WORBLI, and we're going to be here to help. It's as much for us, important that all of our applications are safe and are not going to run into any problems. So we'll certainly make sure that we're putting some resources, on your project to help you get there. But that's really it. Now, there are applications that we're working with at a much deeper level, that we're providing marketing support to, that we're potentially going to help with fundraising, that we're working with token economic strategy. That's far more of a sort of incubator-esque relationship. That's real sort of business development. And so those applications we choose carefully because we only have so many resources, and we want to make sure that we're picking really good projects. So if you really need a lot of help, then the answer is sure. It's a slow process of, getting to know one another and really looking over your project with a fine-tooth comb. If your code's ready and your app's ready to go and you're meeting all the compliance standards and you're taking best practices, you've taken best practices in security seriously, you're fine. Be green lighted in no time. Bring it. We'd love to have it.
Yeah, I've been meeting some interesting people lately who are doing some really cool things. So what would the process look like? I think I was actually going to set up like a WORBLI dev Telegram group where maybe people can gather and kind of talk about some of the things they're doing. But if they wanted to apply, I think they would reach out for Sean Anderson, is it?
Yeah. So you just go to Sean at worbli.io and just send him an email. Tell him, who you are and what you're doing. And Sean's pretty quick to get back to you and set up a time to talk and, send him any documentation or anything that you might have already. It always helps. He can get prepared for that meeting. And we'll definitely, look, we want as many apps to go live on WORBLI as possible. It's only going to provide more opportunities for individual users to create options, to drive innovation. There can be, what's awesome about blockchain is it aligns incentives extremely well. If you get your token economics and your economic model right, and I believe we've gotten it as right as anybody, if not better. So, one of the really cool things as an app developer is, let's say that, there's 4 or 5 people developing a payment gateway. And at first glance, you might think to yourself, well, geez, what if, Sam's payment gateway is amazing and all the users want to use that one and it's hard. Maybe I don't want to launch my payment gateway over here because I'm going to feel like I'll be in direct competition. But if you've taken that time and energy in development and you've purchased some WORBLI tokens to stake your application, you still have an asset, and so maybe, your payment gateway doesn't get the type of traction that you might have expected, but somebody else's does. More than likely too, there's going to be some, cooperation there. People, and our experience in this space is that almost everyone's under-resourced in a sense that there's only so many people that really understand this stuff. So my recommendation is it's highly unlikely that you're going to go out there and if you build, quality, assuming it's quality. I mean, I can't vouch for you if you really don't know what you're doing and you build something that's awful. That is what it is. But if you build something decent, but somebody else just happens to build a product that's a little bit better, I would bet that most likely you're going to end up in some sort of partnership. These things everybody needs good people right now is the gist of it. So I think it's a time in blockchain when you kind of can't lose. If you can show people what you can do, I think your downside's probably a job. Like your downside's probably end up with a job. Or someone ends up kind of absorbing, you and your team and using some of your technology to make their app better. So I encourage people to get out there. I know that we are running across a lot of apps, and Sean and Mitch can speak to this, that just don't have any funding. And I want to be clear to people that there are specific projects that we might be able to help find funding for, but as of right now, we are not your funding resource. So, please don't be coming to WORBLI thinking that we've got some huge pot of gold that we're deploying to fund applications. That's not what we're doing right now. We're helping you develop your app. We can help you turn it into something awesome. But we're not here to fund your project. We hope to be building some of those platforms where people will be able to apply, for funding or put their project up and connect people to fundraising resources. But it's not something that we'll be doing directly, and it's not something that's on the roadmap in the future. There'll just be a few, maybe very select projects that we run across from time to time that we think are of such high quality and so important to the WORBLI infrastructure that we may want to, really try to help get those funded. But I can only think of one so far out of dozens. that's been the case for. So
I wanted to, I won't stick around too long, but I did want to ask you a couple of questions. Now, you said you're not allowed, or you rather shouldn't answer kind of direct questions about applications, but I think these things have been addressed before, which is why I am going to ask you. We have one question from Dave asking if the Fiat Gateway will be a simple Fiat to WORBLI portal, or if there will be other cryptos available, which is a pretty straightforward answer, and we talked about that before, so I don't know if...
Yeah. No, so to help people understand this, one, remember, WORBLI not building anything, right? WORBLI's helping other people build things. We made that decision over 6 months ago that we didn't think that it was the right alignment of incentives, and that we could be seen as being impartial if we're building competing products with stakeholders, right? Which people building apps and going live with apps on WORBLI now become part of this community. And the foundation needs to have that, pristine reputation that we are very serious about, ethically, morally, and otherwise, that we can be relied upon to be fair, first and foremost. And so if we're building a payment gateway and there's 2 or 3 other people building a payment gateway, it's going to be pretty hard if there's any dispute between someone who's building the same product that we are, for them to feel as if we're being impartial. And so we are not building anything directly. They're all being built by third parties. We're just helping in whatever way we can. As far as the Fiat gateways, so we're building the infrastructure that allows Fiat gateways to be created at a level that I don't think anybody's seen, which is to have the type of liquidity that would create the type of sort of seamless transacting that I think people hope for. And so as of right now, the concepts around the Fiat gateways that will eventually get built are for any currency. All of that will be possible, but we expect numerous people to be building those. There is not a direct Fiat gateway right now that we're building or that a specific team is working on. It's all about the infrastructure of moving between fiat currencies, moving between digital and fiat currencies, and digital currencies. So we're creating the infrastructure that allows basically anything and everything to be liquid, because that's what it starts with. And then we expect, as these things go live and people see that the infrastructure is in place, that lots of different people will start introducing various fiat gateway products. So it's just to kind of clarify that. There's not a specific fiat gateway in development. There's the infrastructure to build any and every type of fiat gateway that's in development right now, and to have the liquidity behind it, so that if you were to do it right now, for example, without this infrastructure, you need to provide the liquidity, right? So if Matt builds, US fiat gateway, Matt's got to have a lot of money. Matt has to have a lot of US dollars ready to exchange for cryptocurrency, and Matt's got to have a lot of Bitcoin, whatever or a lot of WORBLI or whatever it is to sort of prime that exchange and that back and forth. Or you need a liquidity partner of some kind, right? So like a small scale case of this is like Bitcoin ATMs, right? For those of you who aren't familiar with how most of those work, the people who deploy the ATM have an exchange account, and the software on the ATM will go, and they need to provide a certain amount of liquidity, a couple Bitcoin or whatever at first. But then what happens is once the balance goes below a certain amount, they have an automatic order to buy at market additional Bitcoins, right? So that then users can go back and forth. But they also have to provide the cash if it's a two-way ATM. On our platform, someone who builds a fiat gateway will be able to get a business account with the bigger, broader global gateway. And so that's how this is working. They shouldn't need to provide too much of their own liquidity. They'll be able to tap into this bigger, broader liquidity.
So otherwise known as wholesale, basically would it be wholesale accounting would be another terminology,
right?
Wholesale gateways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what was really interesting, as long as you got your enough money or enough liquidity, you can create your own. So if you can create your own, you can then create your own loyalty programs or loyalty mechanics into it, similar to as the Apple credit cards, the 2%, cashbacks and so on and so forth. I would have thought there's mechanics where you can really customize those.
Yeah, no, I would think so. Yeah.
Some interesting opportunities anyway. Roger.
And as far as licensure, just to answer that, because I know there was a question from Roger, it's again going to be up to the individual gateway businesses to decide which jurisdictions they want to operate in. That's not a WORBLI thing. We're not going to be getting into money service businesses licenses in the United States and Europe, and the individual applications are the ones. That's why we'll be doing the compliance screening. We know what they need, but they're the ones who will be responsible for that type of licensure.
Perfect. So I guess if nobody else has any more questions, we'll probably end it here for today, and we'll continue back again in 2 weeks. Dominic, I'm going to be stealing you probably later on this week for another interview anyway. And
awesome.
And thanks so much for everything you guys do. It's going to be a heck of a ride this summer, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks everybody for showing up. We appreciate the community, everything that you guys do.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys soon. Bye for now.
Appreciate the support.